Everybody, welcome. I was going to call this podcast The Boomer and the Beast, but I think that was a little bit harsh to Stu. So instead, I've just called it Untitled Wild Rift Podcast. The reason that I approached Stu to do this, I did approach Snitch as well, but he's a busy man. I'll probably get Snitch, or we get Snitch on at a later date.
Yeah, we'll get other people, yeah, for sure.
The reason I approached Stu is to talk a little bit about, if you guys haven't seen it, a really, really quite interesting and in-depth podcast that Chief Aragon, Hell's Devil, and eStreamout did. And they kind of covered a lot of really contentious topics in the community. They kind of covered a lot of things that I know that vocal community members often talk about. And I think they definitely approached it from a perspective of people who are very passionate and actually think very intertwined with the community's needs. And I think that's one thing to really be aware of when you watch that podcast, which if you're watching on my video, I'll have a link in the description. I'm sure Stu will have it on his as well. Yeah. You can guys go and check it out. It's an hour long. It's pretty beefy, but it's time-stamped, and there's loads of great discussions in there. So I don't want to take anything away from Hell's podcast because it was awesome, and you should definitely go and give it a listen. However, I have always, and it's always been the case with me, and I'm sure Stu's the same, always had a different approach to thinking about games and development teams and how things are being run, because I have worked across a lot of games in my time as a commentator or in various other capacities, and I can tell you I have seen quite a lot in terms of the broad capabilities of dev teams and what they can do for you. And I actually think Riot is up there. I'm going to say this right from the beginning, and I don't want you to there are going to be some things that I do criticize, and I'm sure Stu will be the same. But Riot are quite up there in terms of what they give to a community, in terms of their openness and actually what they provide. But we're going to discuss that throughout the podcast.
There's a lot to discuss.
There's a lot to discuss. And Stu, I'm going to jump right into it, and I'm going to bring you to open up this topic, because the number one issue that I think plagues a lot of people, especially at high elo, is matchmaking. And I think it's probably the most contentious topic to talk about right now. There is, if you don't know Josh on Twitter, he is quite open about talking about matchmaking, and I think it's one of the few companies I think that actually openly talks about how they try to approach matchmaking and some of their problems with it. Not many companies disclose how they matchmake. And there is a great paper online, which I'll link, someone investigated, I think it was like Madden, EA's Madden, matchmaking algorithm. And basically in this algorithm, they didn't match you purely on skill. They matched you because a certain amount of wins and losses in a row would cause you to engage with the game for a longer period of time. I believe it was like win-win-loss, win-win would reduce the amount of time that people would go away from the game, and it would keep them engaged with Madden for a longer period of time. And I think that's much easier, by the way, to do in a 1v1 game. And I'm not saying it's the type of matchmaking that I've got my Twitch notifications on for some reason, and I have no idea how to turn them off, so I'm going to figure that out eventually. I think with Madden, obviously it's a 1v1 game, it's much easier to influence outcomes of 1v1 games, and therefore, it's a really interesting paper that you should go and look at, and I think that's much harder to do with Wild Rift, so I'm going to put that out there. I don't think that's the case. But Stu, from your perspective, what do you feel about matchmaking right now? What are the solo queue problems that you think are plaguing matchmaking, but also maybe what are some of the overreactions that we're getting in terms of matchmaking right now?
The thing is with matchmaking, obviously it's hard when you get a player. I mean, I'm sure you can understand, and I understand at the same time as well. When you get a player that is quite lower than kind of your rank overall, the way that I see it is that they're trying to make it so the queue times are obviously not going to be horrendously long, which I think everyone understands that. It is a mobile game. It's not as popular as PC League of Legends, the way that I see it. So it's going to be hard to try and get that full level, high elo sort of matchmaking and things like that. I think it's a difficult one, because it is, like you said, it's kind of a touchy subject, because a lot of people are getting kind of mad and tilted and everything like that. And it's also little topics as well, which I'm sure we'll discuss within matchmaking and everything as well. Overall, in my opinion, I think it's just to do with, I guess we can call it just inconsistency, I guess you can say. I think that's the main word that I like to put out there, is that sometimes you get, I think there was a good example that we were playing actually. Sometimes you get an example where you're in like a high elo lobby, for example. You've got like grandmasters, masters, whatever. When we're like both master, for example, you win that game and you think, oh, okay, we've won in that sort of lobby. So you'd think like, oh, okay, you know, our MMR, secret MMR, whatever you want to call it, goes up, and then you think like, oh, we're going to get the same sort of lobby, but then it just gets really inconsistent, and then you just get completely different lobbies to what you actually were thinking you were getting, you know, because you won the previous game. And I think that works in a different way as well. If you lose in an Emerald lobby, for example, sometimes you get like a crazy Grandmaster Master lobby. I think that's the big thing for me with matchmaking, is kind of the inconsistency with it. But obviously, like I said, I mean, there's loads of different like sub-subjects as well. But I think it's a hard one. It's definitely a hard one, because obviously everyone wants to have fair games. Everyone wants to have a good experience with the game. But in my opinion, at the end of the day, sorry, it's like, you know, it's a mobile game. It is hard to try and get like a fair, I guess you could say, a fair game every single time, because sometimes you see like there's one emerald in one team, one emerald in the other team, but it might work out in different ways, and we'll talk about solo queue and duo queue and things like that. But yeah, I think that's the main things for me. I don't know what you feel about with like kind of the inconsistency of things as well.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head for me in some aspects. I think I don't necessarily have a problem matching into emeralds as a master player, right? I don't necessarily have the problem, because I understand that if I'm either duo queue with a diamond, or my MMR is somewhere in diamond, there is this range of MMRs that I can queue into an emerald.
It's a possibility.
Exactly, emerald happens to be a possibility. As far as I'm aware, you can queue anywhere. If you're diamond 3, for instance, you can queue anywhere from up to like technically emerald 3s to you know, master plus ish, right? There's this, you know, this huge range that you should be able to queue into. And I think the hard thing for Wild Rift is, as you correctly mentioned, balancing queue times with fair matches. Which is the sense that you don't want, like, you do not want to be sitting in queue, because we've had this problem as well, right? We a few months ago, you dial the clock back, and there were like master tier players and grandmaster tier players who were sitting in 15 minutes to get a game. Like there is finding that balance between ridiculous queue times and super fair matches. But I think I 100% agree with you that the consistency for me right now is the issue. I've played plenty of games recently, and actually Josh reached out to me on Twitter because I put a tweet out recently saying, I've got a game with a gold, a platinum, an emerald, a diamond, and I'm in master. Like, it's literally the full rainbow here, you know. And then the game after that, we queued into a Grandmaster Challenger lobby. Yeah. So you know, like it's I don't know how the algorithm can say that was a match that you can be immediately then placed into a match with such wildly different elos in it. And I think that that's the frustrating thing, because if I was queuing consistently into emeralds, my thought process would be, well, my MMR clearly sucks. Like, that's just where my MMR is right now, you know. And we'll talk about MMR in a moment. But the fact is that I'm queuing into emeralds, and then I'm queuing into grandmasters, and then I'm queuing into emeralds, and I'm queuing into grandmasters. So I'm like, well, where is my MMR? I would be much happier to wait an extra 1 minute to 2 minutes to try and find a game that is populated with people more around my rank than, because right now I'm don't get me wrong, queue times are the best they've ever been, because I'm getting thrown into these games in a matter of 5 seconds, which is absolutely unbelievable, you know, and I love that, right? That's great. And I think, and I'm going to be completely realistic with you, Stu, I think if you go down to gold and you have those kind of mismatches, the genuine skill level difference is much lower than you if you have those kind of sort of visible skill tier differences at master and diamond. So like, you have a gold player who gets matched with silver and platinums, I don't think you're going to feel the genuine in-game skill difference as much as if you have the differences at master plus, because there is such a gulf, in my opinion, between emerald and master. And where I actually think, and I might get flamed for saying this, I actually think a lot of silver players are better than some platinum players, and I actually think a lot of platinum players are worse than some silver players, you know, because realistically so many factors go into how you play in a game and like how your skill is expressed. Whereas I think there is much clearer gulf between a lot of master players and there are a lot of emerald players, which is why it feels much more like intrusive and like annoying to have that kind of skill difference at the high tiers. And what is unfortunate for Wild Rift and the dev team is that your vocal players tend to be the high elo players, the ones who are the ones who have the followings from being a pro player, or the ones who have a followings from being a content creator. So yeah, I don't, like I said, not necessarily a problem matching into emeralds, but if I would like to consistently match into emeralds, you know, that I
Yeah,
could,
yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah.
like just to feel like maybe my MMR is the problem, right? And I need to grind it out to get to a better MMR, but it's just the inconsistency that bugs me. And I think it bugs a lot of people, which is, I think the core issue with what most people's frustrations have felt like right now, basically.
I think the thing is as well, I think I don't know if I'm right in saying it, but I feel like most of the time the matches are as balanced as what it can be. Like if you have a master on one side, most of the time you have a master on the other side. If you have an emerald on one side, most of the time you're going to have an emerald on the other side. Obviously sometimes it is a little bit tough. I think I remember a game yesterday I had where it was an emerald one jungler versus a grandmaster jungler. Unfortunately that things happen, but then I realized that actually it was the top laner on their team, which is emerald instead. So you're always going to have that sort of balance of, okay, you're Grandmaster, and then the game feels like, because you're Grandmaster, that you can carry the game with like other people on your team. And then the same with their situation with like, oh, they have a Grandmaster on their team, so that's kind of their point of carry, I guess you could say.
You kind of you bring up
a
really important point here, though, Stu, because some roles are just more influential than others, and I actually think jungle is one of the highest skill expression roles in the game. And I think that when you do get that situation where it's like, okay, well, there's an emerald on either team, but their emerald is their support player, and your emerald is your jungler. And if you get jungle gapped, that's game over. Like that, most of the time, that's game over. I've had so many games where that has been the exact case. It has been a jungle canyon from the beginning, and because jungle is such an influential role to how the game plays out, it's so difficult to come back from that, and you get resentful because you're like, okay, yeah, I understand that the matchmakers tried to balance the teams in that way, but it hasn't taken into account the power of an individual role and how much skill expression comes in between those two roles as well. But I think we've kind of nailed the main community feedback overall here, which is like just the inconsistency of matchmaking, right? And like I said, there haven't been many games where I've thought, well, this matchmaker is just broken, because I've duoed a lot with Keys, for instance, who's Diamond for the most part. And Diamond, I can say, well, okay, I'm duo with a Diamond. Diamond's matching into Emeralds. That makes sense in my head. That can happen, right? But yeah, it's just the inconsistency. And I think that then brings on to this discussion around solo queue and duo queue. And I think maybe we can draw in this conversation about, should there be a solo queue only feature like there is in PC League for Master Tier and above? So what are your thoughts on solo queue and duo queue, and maybe even opening that up to trio queue and penta queue, because those are obviously some contentious topics right now as well?
Yeah, I think 5Q I think is the major, I guess, talking point, especially like you said, you know, with people most of the time, the people that talk are always the high elo people and things like that, and you know, like in Challenger at the moment, I think the thing is with 5Q is that it is annoying. It is a situation where like people that maybe don't have a 5Q feel like, oh, okay, these guys are getting advantage for playing 5Q, etc., things like that. But at the end of the day, in my personal opinion, I might get completely backlash for this. It's a game at the end of the day. You want to play with your friends. You want to have fun. I mean, it's like when we were playing, me, you, Hells, Chief, someone else, I can't remember. Anyway, whatever our 5Q was.
I think it was Keys, right?
Oh, it might have been Keys. Yeah, it might have been Keys. Is that I don't think we've ever had, I think this is the first time where 5Q has actually worked. And I think this is like the first time where 5Q's actually been a possibility with ranked. Now, obviously, then that comes up the situation where, like, should it be a separate queue? Should it be a completely separate thing overall? It's a really hard one. I mean, I'm going into 5Q a bit too much. I think that kind of is like an own topic itself. Obviously, the thing with like solo and duo queue as well, obviously sometimes in solo queue you get matched with a trio and you're sometimes against a trio as well, and kind of the same with duo queue as well, and then you've obviously got the same with trio queue. I think, again, it comes down to matchmaking. It comes down to, if your trio queue is somewhat, I mean, because you're high rank in solo queue, for example, your trio queue might be a lower rank than their, like, the other team's trio queue, for example, like the enemy team's trio queue, because they might be like Grandmaster something Master. Your trio queue might be whatever it is, like Master Diamond or whatever, because your solo queue, like, sometimes that can be a bit of a problem, which, as you mentioned, you know, do you get into a situation where it's kind of like two questions to this thing. It's like, does 5Q go into a separate queue? Does 5Q go into a separate leaderboard? Do we get solo queue onlys, in Master Plus? I think solo queue only in Master Plus, I think, is a bit of a difficult one. I think it would definitely help, but at the same time, I don't think it would help a lot as well. I think that's definitely a bit of a difficult one. I think the whole situation with 5Q and maybe going into a separate leaderboard, but you can still match with the same players from solo queue. Again, there's so many things. I think I'm talking about way too many things at the moment. There's so many different situations, and there's so many different things you have to think about and kind of think about what is the best option for the game, which I think is the most difficult thing for the devs at the moment, is what is the best for Wild Rifts.
I think I'll start with the 5Q topic, because that's an interesting one in its own right. Like you said, 5Q clearly has had impact on leaderboards, for instance, and a lot of pro teams and a lot of high elo players are queuing to 5Q because they know they can only match with only other 5Q players, and usually the best teams are going to consistently win. You will win more consistently in solo queue when you're playing as a 5-man stack, right? Because you just have those comms coordination and you're used to playing as a team. However, and I think that's a bad thing for the solo queue leaderboards, because I think it unfairly influences the solo queue leaderboards. However, flip side, counter argument, 5Q is the most fun I've ever had in this game, and I think we, as you said, we need to boil this down to, at the end of the day, this is a game and it is designed for fun. Now. I think there is obviously this talk about whether 5Q should be a separate leaderboard, but the issue that you're going to face with that is you're splitting queues. And I think if we ever go into discussion about splitting queues and having separate leaderboards, you're always going to get dragged into the situation of player base numbers, and whether there is enough players to support separate queues. Because Vainglory did this and made this mistake. Vainglory launched 5v5, but they kept 3v3 going, and suddenly they just split their player base. And Vainglory ended up with people playing 3v3 and people playing 5v5, and not enough in either to really be good for the game. And I think Wild Rift has got I don't know the player numbers, but I think they've got a very healthy number of players, especially in Western audiences where these games have traditionally been harder to make work just due to our culture. But I actually think they've got a good number of players, got a lot of challenger players, and that is usually a good indicator about the rest of the board. And I think, in general, we've got a good number of players in EU, and probably got a good number of players in other regions as well, although I can't speak for other regions because I've not played in them. But is that enough to support a separate queue? Because Riot got rid of 5Q, right? They kept Flex Q, but it's I would say a much less popular mode than solo queue, duo queue, right? But they got rid of 5Q, and I think a part of that reasoning was that they really didn't want to split the gameplay out too much. And I think splitting queues is always going to be a problem in any mobile game, especially when you're trying to build up a consistent player base. Because if you split the queues too early, you're suddenly going to make ranked experience in one of them that much worse, because you just don't have the players to support
the player base.
Exactly. So it's a really, really difficult thing to answer in that sense. Solo queue, duo queue, then. Contentious answer from me. I do not want to get rid of duo queue above master, and that's not because I just like playing it. Don't get me wrong. I much prefer playing duo queue than any other form of ranked in this game, just because I enjoy playing with people. But that's the point. I think we need to just, again, boil it back down to, this is supposed to be a social game for the most part. People do enjoy playing with their friends. And, I understand it from the League PC perspective, because they have a really established high elo ecosystem, right? When you're in Master Plus, you are gearing up for potential ERLs. You're gearing up for potentially entering into the semi-professional player ecosystem. And I don't think Wild Rift is there yet. I think Wild Rift needs some more time to mature as an esport, and therefore the high level of play that we've got, the high level leaderboards and the high level solo queue, needs some more time to mature to the point where solo queue only would be an option. I think solo queue only would obviously improve game experience, and I think Stu brought up a great point about the types of duo queues and trio queues that you're matching into above a certain rank. And I think also what I wanted to raise as well was composition of those solo queue and duo queues. A bot lane duo queue who matches into a non-bot lane duo queue is always going to have an inherent advantage because of the way they're supposed to synergistically play together in that laning phase. Just like, in my opinion, a jungle bot lane trio queue or a jungle mid-top trio queue is always going to have a really good advantage if the enemy team does not have a similar set of roles reflected in their particular queues. But that's not something that's easy to solve. And actually, I think it's unfair to say that Riot should solve that, because I think that's just it's a minor thing that influence. I just don't know how you would matchmake effectively if you brought those kind of parameters. And we already have raised issues with some of the matchmaking things, which I do think there is a problem with the, like I said, the inconsistency. But I think if you start to add more parameters and you start to add more asks of the matchmaking system, it is just going to make it harder to get fairer matches on the whole, right? And I think that's one of the problems. So my summary is 5Q. I like it because it's fun. I want a game to be fun. I want Wild Rift to be fun. The same reason applies to when I think about solo queue and duo queue and trio queue, especially above certain ranks. And it's and I think when it comes to the composition of duo queues and trio queues, I think yes, they have an impact. No one's saying they don't, and I especially feel that and feel it on a regular basis. But to add extra parameters to matchmaking, I think would prove more issues than solve, essentially.
Yeah, I think it all just comes down to player base. I think that's kind of the way that we've kind of spoke about this, is like when you add these sort of situations where it's like solo queue only, separate leaderboards, PC League, for example, has that, like you said, has that established player base. They have the players there to be able to make these decisions. But for Wild Rift, for example, I just don't feel like we have the player base at the moment to be able to make, or for the devs, sorry, to actually make them decisions. And it's a difficult situation. I mean, we spoke about all of that. I mean, we could quickly speak about like, LP games and MMR and things like that as well. I think it's like a very quick subject that we can talk about. Obviously, I think for me, the one thing with like the whole LP game system and things like that, it's been very up and down like the past few seasons. Like we've had some seasons where it's just like we're just getting +10, -15. There was, I think, last season, like everyone was getting like, I think it was +15, -15, and this season it's kind of gone back down again. So it's been a bit all over the place. And obviously we know that like they're kind of testing with obviously what you're saying with Josh and everything. He's quite open about it. He's been saying that obviously they're testing different systems. They're seeing how things work. I guess you can go into this, I hate saying this, you can go into the situation, you can go into the topic of it is beta, quote unquote. I don't really believe in that sort of thing because it's been out for like, over a year now and everything. So it's like, I wouldn't really say it's still in beta, but it is that situation where they are still testing things. The game is not going to be, I guess, perfect in a way, and they are going to be trying out a few things. I think the LP gains and losses, I think the only real issue for me, and it's not really an issue, it's just more of like, I guess you could say consistency in a way, is that when you go into a situation where you have like this whole Emerald lobby, Grandmaster lobby, Emerald lobby, Grandmaster lobby, you seem to always get the same LP sort of gains and losses. It doesn't matter what sort of lobby you get into. You could be an Emerald and be not an Emerald, so you could be a Diamond, for example. You can get to like a Master Grandmaster lobby, but then in the next game you can get in an Emerald lobby, you can win both games but gain the same LP amount, which I feel like for me, the one I guess that I kind of want changing in a way is like try and make the LP system work around what the actual skill level of the game is itself. Because I feel like, I mean, I don't know what you think, Excoundrel, but I feel like at the moment it's just a set number, kind of depending on your rank and not depending on the game skill level, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think if there's one thing that I do have an issue with, it has been, again, the inconsistency of LP gains in both Master and Diamond. I have been getting +13, -17 in Master with a 60% win rate in my ranked season, which, if you to go off what you think MMR should do in terms of influencing your LP gains, then that doesn't make much sense to me. And yes, I get Grandmaster lobbies and I win, I get 13. I get Emerald lobbies and I win, I get 13. It doesn't seem to make a difference. Now, I understand at high elos capping LP gains to prevent ridiculous elo inflation. I think, one thing you have to remember is especially when you're partway through the season, if you have challengers that are getting to 1,300, 1,400 plus LP, you're going to get people who enter Challenger and just can't be bothered to try and grind for a good position because it would just take too much time. So obviously, the higher you go on the ladder, the more restriction on your LP gains there should be, because you don't want people getting to ridiculous LP values, because it demotivates player base and people who are entering that level to want to try and grind higher and get better. So yes, there should definitely be some LP caps, and there should be stopping on LP inflation at the higher ends. But my God, please sort LP gains out in Diamond and Master and sometimes even Grass Surrounds, because I am going out of my mind getting plus 13, minus 17 every single game, and I don't understand why, and it pisses me the frick off. And like, I don't understand the mechanisms behind LP gain and how it's attached to MMR, because as you said, the type of lobby that I'm entering does not seem to influence the type of LP gains that I'm getting, which in League PC it did. So, you know, that's something that I do have an issue with. It's not a major issue, don't get me wrong. No. It's not crippling my love for the game, but it is something that is an annoyance, especially when you're like I really wanted to try and get Challenger this season, but I'm getting plus 13, minus 17 every game, and I have to maintain like a 66% win rate to try and get Challenger, which if I'm playing in even lobbies is very difficult to do. But you know, that is what it is. And in a word on MMR, this is a topic that I don't think many people understand, but I also don't think it's a topic that is communicated on well enough either. So I think there is fault on both sides here. MMR is a hidden number that is not associated directly, but is loosely associated with your visual skill tier. By the way, Riot, while you're at it, please kill the Smurf badges. You're not fooling anyone. I'm just being serious.
I was waiting for something like that to come up.
No, you're not fooling anyone. No, everyone has seen through the Smurf badges now. But no, look, I think.
Oh god.
I think with MMR, you need to realize that this is a number that is calculated through various mechanisms that Riot do not talk about openly, but have given some loose indication as to what influences your MMR. This MMR is what they match you on. They do not actually match you on gold, silver, emerald, master. That is just a representation on the ladder of where you've got to. And I think because of, especially pre-diamond, because it operates on this like little notch system, and you have also loss prevention, you have very inflated MMRs as you go up, because loss prevention, also you have very low MMRs rather as you go up, because loss prevention, you'll still lose MMR when you lose a game, but you don't lose a place in your visual skill tier. Yeah. So you lose MMR, but you don't lose a place in your visual skill tier. So then eventually you might end up with diamonds who do not have the MMR of a true diamond player because of this loss prevention. And this is my case, by the way, against loss prevention, because it's something that happened in Vainglory. If you put loss prevention in, you end up with players who are, on the whole, over the course of many, many games, higher than where they should be, because of loss prevention. Essentially, it inflates your visual skill tier compared to your MMR. Because those losses that you would take on the balance of all probabilities, even through AFKs, you know, they are no longer counted in your visual skill tier progression. But your MMR does get affected, and you don't actually get better at the game. It's a whole discussion that I think could be having its own podcast on. But you know, loss preventions, whilst I think they are important, especially for the player, like how the player feels about the game, they do, on the whole, artificially inflate skill in the game in terms of visual skill tier. But the one thing that is important to know about MMR is that it's not directly associated with what your border says when you load into a game. If I had my way, I would kill loading borders and just let people go into the game completely blank and honestly just judge it based on the way people play. Unfortunately, loading borders are such a pride point for players when they enter into a game. But if I had my way, I would kill loading borders, because no one then goes into a game biased against a certain player. It's all based on the way that they play in the game itself, right? And then you could come out of the game, and I bet you more often than not, people would come out of the game and go, wow, that guy was Emerald, like he played really good. Or, oh my god, I can't believe that guy was Master. How bad did he play that game? Like, honestly, if you just kill loading borders, you kill prejudice when you go into games. I know it sucks because people like showing off their fancy rank, but it would honestly, in my opinion, improve the perception of your solo queue games, because you would not be immediately biased against someone when you go into the game. But that's just my personal opinion. But yeah, that's my thoughts on like MMR, and I just wish LP games were more consistent based on your lobby, like you said, Stu. And also just wanted to illustrate that MMR is not a number that you see, and it's not directly associated with your visual skill tier. However, it is closely enough, like it should be closely enough associated with your visual skill tier that you shouldn't get ridiculous gaps in matchmaking, which do sometimes happen, and that's the issues that I think people are raising on the whole.
I mean, we've never had a situation, I guess, because of PC League of Legends in terms of like, I'm going to go back to the loss prevention thing and everything. It's kind of a weird system for me because you have it up to a certain rank, and like, I don't really know what their decision was behind like the whole loss prevention thing and the whole like mark system or whatever you want to call it and things like that. But like you said, I mean, you get into a situation where people are getting diamond because of this loss prevention and everything, and then the thing is though, is even though you are in diamond, sometimes you have that possibility of that diamond player being in your grandmaster lobbies or being in your master lobbies. But I feel like if everything was, I mean, this is probably completely crazy, but imagine if like everything, like every single tier was based off of LP and everything like that, like, would that be better? Would that be a situation where like it might be a thing? And there's also another topic about that as well. It's the whole situation that they did a few months ago, I think now, where they completely removed what's the word called? Promotions. They completely removed promotion series, which I think a lot of people were like tipsy-turvy about. I personally think it was, I don't know. Again, it's another one of them situations, another one of them topics where it's like some people liked it, some people don't like it. You know, some people liked it in a way that's like, oh, it's, you know, it's a way to like just not have that much pressure to be able to play in them promo matches, and then you don't have the situation of, oh, I've got a bad player or something, or I've got an AFK or something, a promotion series, so it negatively affects you. And then you also have the situation where it's like not having promotion series could be bad in a way because of a situation of someone gets to jump up a tier that maybe they don't deserve in a way. And I guess that's kind of another topic to talk about, is the promotion series.
Yeah, I mean, to your first point, what I'd say is I don't think there are that many players that are suddenly becoming diamond because of loss prevention. But what I would say is, on the balance of a year's worth of gameplay and you know, millions of games being played over the course of that year, you will have people that are higher than they maybe should be because that loss prevention is in place. And if you add another layer of loss prevention in there, including, you know, AFKs or whatever, that's only going to continue to inflate people beyond where their skill tier should be. You know, and I have always been, and the players, honestly, players hate it when I say this because I got flamed on Reddit for saying this. But realistically, you know, if you're good enough, you will get there. You are never like you on the balance of 100 to 200 games. You are not held back by your team over 200 games. If you are saying that I'm Emerald, but I'm held back by my team, and you've played 400 games this season, get in the goddamn bin. Because honestly, that's not the case. You know, you do not get held back by your team over that many games. Yes, some games are out of your control. I'm going to tell you that 100%. Some games you're going to have a feeder. Some of your games you're going to have someone who's outclassed and is just doing badly. But your team does not hold you back over that many games.
Yeah.
And then what I would also say about the perception of matchmaking, the perception is that when you load, and I'm gonna walk you through the process of a matchmaking game in Wild Rift, right? Wild Rift looks at 5 MMRs and 5 MMRs, and they try to find the closest set of MMRs to balance across 2 teams. And they generally tend to, I think, have 5 MMRs on one side that they take an average of, 5 MMRs on the other side that they take an average of, whack them together and try and get it to give you like an average team MMR that is close on both sides, right? That's how they do it. That gets you to champion select. That's what Riot's matchmaking does, right? Riot's matchmaking gets you to champion select. It takes as many people on both teams that have put role preference in for their right queues, got them into the best roles possible for them, if they can, and puts you in champion select. That is where Riot's influence ends. If you have someone that is an Ezreal one trick, but that just randomly fucking decides to play Lucian on his game, of course he's going to play like garbage, right? You have a Yasuo, you know, I don't know, let's say you have an Akali player that's like, oh, I'm just going to play Yasuo this game, and like then just proceeds to freaking run it down. That's not Riot's problem. Riot cannot predict human behavior. And this is something that is so important to understand. Human behavior is impossible to predict on a really accurate level. And Riot's matchmaker can only get you into champion select. The decisions that are made from champion select, how your team comp stacks up, if there are any counter picks on either side, that is not something that gets predicted, right? So that is, no one ever talks about it, and everyone always blames matchmaker, right? And yes, we have clearly highlighted there are matchmaking problems, and I'm not taking away from the matchmaking problems, but player behavior, team comps, counter picks, what what champions they've chosen to play, how they're even like, are they tilted? Are they not tilted? Are they tired?
Toxicity,
Are they not
things
tired?
like that, yeah.
Like all of these things play into how a perception of a match is. And those are things that Riot cannot influence. And that is really important to understand because they are things that suck, but they suck with every online game ever created for the history of mankind. It's just humans. It's literally like Riot. And like I said, Riot definitely has inconsistency with matchmaking, but humans are the problem when it comes to, like, honestly, people are the problem when it comes
people
to...
always the problem.
and that's honestly very, very true. But I'm not saying that Riot are innocent on matchmaking because they're not. We've talked about it, but I just want to highlight that point specifically. Where was I even going with that discussion? There was a point about we talked a little bit about the
loss prevention and promos.
Promos. There we go.
Yeah, promo.
Thank you, Stu, keeping me on track.
Nice.
I actually like that they got rid of promotion series. I think they were frustrating. I think that they often allowed players to either get into a tier and then just not play again. They gave people anxiety when playing towards the end of their tier.
Yeah.
I have been much more comfortable. But I will say it is tilting as frick if you're ever in Diamond 4 and get demoted to Emerald and they're like, do you know what? We're not going to take 1 dot away from you. We're taking 2 dots away from you. And you're like, fuck off. Like, just like no. I wanted to be like Diamond, where I can lose one and then win one and then lose one and then win one. But no, you have to be like 2. Look,
just get away 2.
This is like season 2 flashbacks to me, or season 3 flashbacks. I can't remember. But basically, one season, I just kept getting demoted into Emerald, and it just kept going 2 dots off, and I was like, can you fuck off? Like, it tilted the living daylights at me. It's not so bad at Master tier. You get demoted down to Master into Diamond 1, you play 1 game, you're back in Master, etc., etc. It's actually not that bad. But I do find it's more frustrating when they take that many notches away from you when you lose a promo, like, or you demote. I actually think they should adjust that now and say, if you drop out of a Diamond into Emerald, you should be able to go from Emerald directly back into Diamond in 1 game, rather than having to win 2 to get you to that point. But that's just my personal opinion. You mentioned Toxicity, though. Let's briefly talk about Toxicity. I'm going to open the field here, and I want to talk a little bit about AFKs, first of all. AFK players exist in every single online game ever. I have come into way more AFK players in my PC League lifetime than I have in Wild Rift. And I actually think, and I can say this with my hand on my heart, and maybe it's worse at low elos, I don't know. I have not had that many problems with genuine AFKers in Wild Rift since I started playing this game. And if I can, and maybe it's different in different regions, but in Europe, I can maybe count the number of true AFKers on 2 hands in my entire year and a half of playing Wild Rift, and I'm being completely 100% genuine here. Yes, I've had people go AFK when they've fed or the game's going wrong. That's a different form of toxicity, which we'll talk about now. But genuine AFKers, and I also think you do need to add an extra layer of forgiveness in there because it's a phone game. Like, if you get a phone call, it pulls you out of the game. If you get, if you have to go because you've realized you're missing a meeting or your game's up, like, it's yes, of course, you should always make time. You make time for a game. You should always make sure you've got enough time to complete a ranked game. But it is a phone game at the end of the day. We do need to be a bit more understanding of that, I think, when it comes to assessing AFKs. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on AFKs, Stu.
Yeah, I think, I mean, as you said, I mean, no one really likes AFKs. Me and you've played PC League for God knows how many years. We've had situations from PC League as well, which I think PC League is a whole different topic. I think if you're AFK in a PC game and League of Legends, I think that's a really, really big problem. But obviously AFKs in a mobile game, you can kind of understand because, like you said, it's a mobile game and everything as well. There was actually one thing I wanted to kind of bring up about AFKs, and again, it's coming from us with the PC side of things, is that I probably only have ever had this like once or twice, but AFKs at the start of the game, and I'm talking about right at the start. Now in PC League, they do a situation, I can't remember what the name's called actually of it, where it's like a remake system. Yeah, exactly. So there's a situation where in PC League, if people don't know, if you start a game, if someone's AFK at the base, if they haven't loaded into the game, if their phone dies, or okay, I'm talking about phone. If their PC dies or whatever, if their internet dies and they're AFK at the start of the game, you can go into a situation. I think it's after 2 minutes you can remake the game. You won't lose any LP, you won't lose anything at all. Nothing happens. I think it's only the player that was AFK gets punished for it, basically. That coming into Wild Rift, I think, would be a big thing. I don't know how they would do it. I don't know what, you know, in what situations they would do it and everything like that, because I think it's a bit difficult.
Yeah, I've got opinions on this topic, Stu. I've got opinions on this topic, Stu.
We got opinions on everything.
Yeah.
Go on.
Okay. I love the idea. The practicality of it in Wild Rift, I think, is harder to make work, because the timescales in League PC and the timescales in Wild Rift are much more different. In terms of, like, I think it's 3 minutes in League PC, and then you can if they haven't come back before after 3 minutes, you can surrender the game and it doesn't count. But 3 minutes is nothing in League PC. Like, I think you can barely get level 3 or level 4 by the time that 3 minutes rolls around. In 3 minutes in Wild Rift, you've got a level 6 jungler, and you know you're looking at almost your first dragon of the game. And 1 minute, and if they're not here for 1 minute, that's recoverable a lot of the time. So, like, actually setting a threshold for remakes is, I think, quite difficult. Not saying that it shouldn't be something like that shouldn't be looked into, because I fully agree with you. AFKs from the start of the game are genuinely frustrating. I've had them happen very infrequently, very infrequently, but they are frustrating. And I do think there should be some kind of something applied, like even if it's just like splitting their natural gold generation with the rest of the team, or your team gets slightly better gold generation, which I think the problem is it could be quite busted because of how easy it is to sometimes solo carry with certain champions. But you know, I think there should be something looked at, and I definitely think it's something that should be explored. But that the system in League PC, I think, would be very difficult to apply to Wild Rift, because the pace of the game is so much different. You know, imagine if you were playing a game. By the time you're 3 minutes in, often you can be 3-0 in lane, you know, having the time of your life, and then suddenly the game's like, it's remade, you know, and you're just like, that's
true. Yeah, I think I can definitely agree with that. And then I mean, is there a situation where it's like, is 1 minute really? Would you say it's recoverable? I mean, I guess in a way, because of the whole like system with like the base. I mean, not the base. Sorry, the XP that you generate over time, the gold that you generate over time is a lot more than obviously PC League. Then I guess that is a situation where it, you know, like you said, it can be recoverable. I mean, like I said, I've rarely had that situation. I think I've only, like I said, I only remember having it once, and I think I only remember seeing it once as well in a situation. But I think that's a definitely an interesting thing that I wanted to bring up, is like that. I think that definitely should be a thing. But like you said, trying to find a way to try and figure out what you would do in that situation if they're AFK from the start, then that's a whole different story. But
what I would love to see is, and this is a wild idea, it just came into my head right now. If that player returns at some point in the game, like 4 minutes in, I would love for them to have a peace shield until they are 1 level below the average in the game. So let's say you have like someone who's like an AFK mid who's level 1, they come back and their enemy Z is level 5. That Z will abuse the crap out of them. I'd love for them to have a peace shield until they're level, like 1 level below the average level across the whole game. So they can't be killed, and they can absorb some experience. The only problem is how abusable that might be, like in like team fight situations. It's difficult.
It's hard. It's a hard.
Or maybe if they're like in their turret proximity range, they get a peace shield, so you can't abuse it around objectives, for instance. You know, but like, it's a wild idea, but like,
it's a cool idea.
Just like somehow getting them back into the game, getting them back up to speed, especially, you know, in a fast-paced game like Wild Rift would be really cool. That's like one thought, but obviously I have no idea, like XP, like hyper XP catch up or something like that. Something in the game to potentially influence getting an AFK player back into the game would be really nice.
I guess quickly on that before we move on to the next thing, there is that thing about like whoever has the least gold on the team does get a little bit more gold as well. So I guess that's kind of helpful in a way. I mean, obviously it's the same with every single game, even if you don't have an AFK, but I guess that is helpful in a way. But
kind of, yeah.
But yeah, do we?
It's like a pretty piddly amount of gold though. So
yeah. I mean, like I said, that rarely happens. So it's like it was just an interesting thing that I thought I'd bring up. But I guess we come into the next toxicity thing, which
like
it's a bit of a weird subject. Which I've actually changed myself on this as well, which is something that you do as well. But I'll let you start with it.
Yeah, don't type shoot. I tell Hells and I tell you, Hells is reformed.
So...
I'm just like, don't type. Like as a content creator, it's just almost never worth it to type in chat. But look, toxicity. League of Legends is uniquely, and it has garnered a reputation for being a toxic game. That's the general meme on the internet that League players are extremely toxic, and I think a lot of the Twitter circles and stuff would meme around the toxicity around League of Legends and that kind of community as well, and that culture has bled a little bit into Wild Rift, I would say. I would love, and my personal stance on it is that you should have a strike system that is very harshly implemented for both AFKing in the middle of a game, even if it is accidental, and also chat toxicity. I think that if you AFK in the middle of the game, there should be 3 strikes. If you get those 3 strikes, no matter how far apart they are, or like within a certain season, you're getting banned from ranked for a small amount of time. And then if you do it again, you get banned from ranked. And 1 AFK after that, you get banned again for a longer amount of time. And 1 AFK again, you get banned from ranked. I think you genuinely need to remove these people from the ranked queue so that they can't influence ranked anymore. I think it is such a minority of your player base that actually it's not going to affect your overall experience of people in ranked if you remove them. The same with extremely toxic people. I think they should be cut out of the rank queue and like they should be removed and then allowed to go back in when they've started to learn. Or like you should just be implementing these ridiculously long chat bans that you see, that a lot of people get. Those should be used. I honestly think those should be used more frequently as well. But my genuine opinion is there should be 0 tolerance for AFKing and zero tolerance for hypertoxicity. Those people should be removed from the ranked queue. It doesn't have to be removed from the game in total, but you should limit their access to privilege things like chat. And you should also just be like having this strike system in place for AFKs. I think if you AFK and you're registered as AFK, you should lose double the amount of LP. I think there should be like
wow. That's fair. That's fair.
I genuinely think that these things ruin the experience for everyone else, and they should be dealt with more harshly. The counter argument for dealing with these things really harshly is that you remove generally high elo players from the pool of players that can be matched with, and therefore it might impact overall matchmaking, and that leads us back to the first topic. But I don't care. Get rid of them, because they do ruin the game experience for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think the one thing about chat toxicity, I mean, we spoke about at the start of the thing where we're going to take one thing and take it and look at both sides of the story. I mean, I'm going to take it look from the other side of the story, and kind of what we said already. Everyone is human. We all get mad. We've all had situations where we've probably been toxic, maybe not as much and everything. I was like, yeah, I mean, everyone's had a situation. Everyone wants to win at the end of the day. We're all human. We all want to be competitive. We all want to win games. There are some situations where you feel like, oh, this person's playing bad, I'm going to flame him. This person's doing bad, whatever, things like that. Everyone makes mistakes. You make mistakes. Someone on your team might make a mistake. There are situations where everyone does get toxic as well. Obviously, people know my stream that I sometimes do get toxic. Obviously, Excoundrel, you just said you get toxic. Everyone gets toxic. It's I mean, I think there's just a difference between being, I think, like you said, being kind of, I guess, like saying a few toxic things to then going overboard, like completely overboard with toxicity and things like that as well. One thing that I've done, which I know you've done as well, is just leave it on just party chat only. That's what I've actually done recently, and you'll actually be surprised how much it actually benefits you, because the only thing then you're following is pings, well, I think that's pretty much it, actually. It's just pings, basically. That's all you're following. You then concentrate on your own game, you concentrate on yourself, and you'll be surprised how much of a big difference it will actually make. But obviously, as I said, everyone's human. We all make mistakes. We all get toxic sometimes. Everyone wants to win. Everyone wants to climb. Just enjoy the game. You know, that's the way that I feel about it anyway. Because obviously, it's hard, and I think there is a definitely a barrier where going overboard is obviously, like you said, definitely punishable. And if it happens on a consistent basis, then it is punishable. But in some situations, you will get mad at your teammates. Teammates will get mad at you. Mistakes and everything happen and everything like that. I don't know what you feel about that yourself.
I think when I say extreme toxicity, I mean the types of toxicity that you would read a screenshot of and think that should not be allowed, right? You know, I think you raise a really good point. We are humans. We get frustrated. We want to win. It's very easy to take your frustrations out on someone who's not playing well in your game and other people. You shouldn't do it. And look, I'm not innocent of this. I am definitely, even recently, I can, like a few days ago, maybe I typed some crap I probably shouldn't have typed because I was frustrated at a game, right? You know, but Stu's right. Like, I generally try to run with party chat only now because that is the way that I find that I've enjoyed the game significantly more when the tool is taken away from me and I can't use it, basically. And that actually has allowed me to focus more on my own gameplay and focus more on... And I actually think that the Wild Rift, you can communicate with pings. I don't think you need to communicate with chat, actually. I think pings are sufficient to communicate key parts of the game. And a lot of inbuilt knowledge is quite innate. And so therefore you don't often need to be told exactly what to do because you kind of get into the rhythm of a game of Wild Rift over many games of playing. But yeah, I think some toxicity should be allowed for. This is like, when I say some, and I don't mean toxicity. I think the toxicity is a bad word for it. Some frustration or venting should be allowed for because it is a competitive game. But there is a limit to what should be allowed to be said. You know, if you're breaching the realms of sexism, racism, any kind of, you know, like boundary breaking toxicity, that should be a zero tolerance policy on those kind of things. And yeah, but I think like some genuine frustration venting is natural, and I think any competitive environment is going to have that, and I think that should not be different in games. But we just need to be a bit more careful about it because it's much like you would never say some of the things that you see from the extreme toxic people in Wild Rift in a football game because you would get laid out. Like you would actually just get knocked out because people would. Imagine would have had to deal with it. Imagine you play a pickup game of football and you tell your goalkeeper's mother, like you want to do something to your goalkeeper's mother in a really extreme way that you sometimes see. He would knock you out, and then like that's the way that there's this anonymity. It's an internet culture thing. It's not just a Riot Games thing. It's an internet culture thing. But we should because we have the tools to police it, we should police it, you know, more heavily maybe than we sometimes do. But some frustration and toxicity, you know, venting should be allowed, I think, in a competitive game. Wow, we've been going for an hour and we've covered like this much of
we've covered nothing.
We've covered nothing. Right, let's move on. This one will be I think this one can be relatively quick because it's content creator stuff, and I don't think it's as interesting to the general public. Content creator support. For those of you that don't know, Riot has a system called the League Partner Program, which covers all of their titles, and you get invited to this League Partner Program, and they have it for, again, like I said, each of their individual games and each of their individual titles. And I think, in general, it's a really good system. Yes, okay, and I'm not going to get into the details. Mileage may vary in terms of like how the League Partner Program interacts with you as a content creator, but I think it's a good system. You do get access to lots of ways to help grow your socials. You get access to a lot of things. Especially for League PC, you get access to a lot of things that can help you with content creation. I think what is different about Wild Rift, and that's the only perk that we get with Wild Rift right now, is we get access to early patch notes, which allows us to do patch note content creation. That is not because they don't want to offer us anything more. It's because I think in general they don't have as much to offer the Wild Rift content creators right now. But I think that will change as the game matures and grows and gets more options. But actually, I do think Riot do give a decent amount of content creator help. It does bring us on to the talk about promotion of content creators, though, and and I think the problem with promotion of content creators is not that I wouldn't like it to happen. It's how do you stop it from favoring certain content creators or certain people.
I agree.
You know, I think there definitely should be a way to amplify voices that need to be amplified. People of color, and you know, various other parameters that fit into to the need for amplification. But I would say that it's difficult, I think, to be fair in the way that you assign content creator promotion, either in game or on socials or whatever, because you're always going to leave someone out. Yep. And it's better to leave everyone out than to leave some people out. And that's one of the problems when it comes to content creation, because I'll take Hells for example. He's done an amazing job with his channel. He's the most popular Wild Rift YouTuber by a country mile. The interaction that he gets on his videos is insane. It would be natural for Riot to want to promote Hells more because he's a very engaging content creator and people love him. However, if you just promote only Hells, then you get this feedback loop of people who just cycle into the same channel, and some of the other content creators get left out of that circle. If Hells doesn't get promoted, then he will probably see that as being unfair. And if they're just promoting it from smaller content creators all the time, you might be missing out on the quality content that Hells provides. You might be missing out on, Hells might feel a little bit unfairly treated being the biggest content creator in Wild Rift, right? So, I think there are so many different things that make it difficult to make content creation by the developer themselves fair, or to content creation promotion by the developers fair. But there was always ways to maybe do group promotions or round tables or some other way to integrate content creators into the way that Riot interacts with their community. And I think community interaction and community projects are a way to bring content creators into the fold and provide that level of promotion. But my personal opinion is that it's difficult to make it 100% fair. That would just be my personal take.
Yeah, there's a couple of things I want to mention. I think it's a whole situation as well between this gap of, I guess you can say, us in general as big content creators and also smaller content creators at the same time, because I mean I do feel like, and I'm always quite an open person about this, and I think quite a lot of people, my viewers and everything know, is that I myself, I always want to help, the smaller content creators. And I think it's always good to help them smaller content creators as well, because sometimes the smaller content creators won't be able to have that sort of voice or have that sort of, I guess, sort of audience or space that maybe me, Excoundrel, Hells, and whoever else does, for example. I think the only thing I feel like with the whole content creator system at the moment as well, which is, I might get a bit of backlash for this, is the whole, I guess there is a lot of situations at the moment where America in general, which I don't really know the reason behind this, I don't know why this is really a thing, but America get a lot of, how can I explain it? A lot of, I guess you can call it events, I guess you can say, and things like that, in terms of for content creators and things like that. I think for Europe, we don't really get a lot of events. I would love to get a situation. I would love for us to set up a situation where it's just me, you, Excoundrel, Dartbreaker, Hells, we all get a team of 5 or something like that of our viewers, and they all battle it out and we all comment about it. Or there's a situation where it's just 10 content creators all battle it out together and we all have a fun 5v5 situation. In my opinion, there's not really a lot of that at the moment, and I think that's a good way of kind of bringing, I guess, all the content creators together as well at the same time. Obviously, we could do things like this all the time, but I feel I mean, I don't know what you feel about this, but I feel again, I don't know the reason why or anything. America definitely do get a lot more, I guess, events and things like that compared to Europe and things like that. Like I said, I might get a bit of backlash for that and everything, but that's just my honest opinion. And obviously, we're looking at both sides of the perspective on these things as well.
You won't get backlash, and I'm going to explain to you exactly why that's the case, right? And this is not just unique to Wild Rift. Why do you think LCS gets big sponsorships? Why do you think North American esports in general has more money in it than European esports as a whole? It's because North America is one market. It's one big market, right? It has a lot of people in it, and they're all unified under the same banner. So when you try to create something for the North American market, you need to create one product that is applicable to a country with a huge population. Huge population, but they're all the same people. They speak mostly the same language, and that one product can be applied nationwide across all the states to a buttload of people, right? It is very easy to market a product to America because you only need to do one thing. Europe is not like that. Europe is
you're right.
Europe is multiple countries of multiple languages with different communities viewing the content in their own way, with different cultures, with different products that they like, with as I said, different content creators speaking different languages. It's not that and again, I don't actually think this is Riot's problem per se. Riot probably get approached by third parties to run these kind of events, and it's much easier for these third parties to invest in it because North America is a single large market. Europe is fragmented and is many markets, and so therefore it's why you don't get much pan-European marketing in any kind of business, unless you're talking like globally recognized brands, like Coca-Cola or Pepsi, etc. France has a whole different selection of products to the UK. You look at you go to a French supermarket and you will barely recognize most of the brands that you're viewing compared to an English supermarket. You go to a German supermarket and you won't recognize many of the products and brands that are in the German supermarket because it is wildly different across every country and it's so fragmented. And it's not 100% the same with content and esports and Wild Rift, but it's generally why you find it harder to raise money or raise interest or investment into European events, because it is a fragmented market where you're not going to get as much bang for your buck. You get way more bang for your buck running things in America because it is a very large population, all speak English. You only need to do it in one language, or mostly speaking English, and it's that you're appealing to a very, very large cohort of people. That's the main thing.
On the other side of things, well, obviously Wild Rift is still relatively new, and like we talk about the whole. I mean, you spoke about already the whole situation with like the LPP and things like that as well. Obviously, League PC gets quite a lot of things. Obviously, Wild Rift at the moment, unfortunately, not a lot. But again, like you said, I think it will just come over time. I guess, like you said, in terms of situations like that. But I mean, that's just like a small subject, I guess, on like us as content creation and things like that.
Like I said, I think I don't want to get into too much content creator stuff. It's not that interesting for the person. But there's a couple of the points that Hell's raised that I want to talk about. Content creators abandoning. I just burped. Content creators abandoning Wild Rift. Look, content creators are fleeting. I know that because I have changed games across my YouTube career like 9 times. At end of the day, content creators, there is a culture of content creation that if you're not making money from it and you can't make a living from it, you can't be bothered. People will come and go from Wild Rift all the time. Wild Rift as a content creation platform, to create content for Wild Rift, very few people on this planet right now can make a sustainable living from Wild Rift content creation alone. From YouTube, from Twitch, there aren't many people out there that can sustain themselves in content creation. Life gets in the way. You realize you need to get a job. You need, if you're not making money from it, you're never going to be in it forever. And that's just a fact of life, unless you have the time and it's a passion project. I do not make much money from Wild Rift content creation. My YouTube, I can't reveal the figures specifically, but I tell you what, I'm not getting much change from $500 a month. So end of the day, it's I'm not getting a huge amount from Wild Rift content creation. I'm doing it because I love the game, and I have a job. So it's one of those things that whereas someone like, I don't know how much Hells makes. I'm not going to even guess how much Hells makes, but I bet you he makes an amount that he can probably live off relatively well. He's got a really great thing going with a daily video hitting 10k plus views. I know how much money that makes from my auto chess days, and he's probably doing okay and can do it as a job. He can do it as a full-time thing, and he can pour all his heart and soul into it, and that's a great position to be in. But not everybody. The tiny percent are going to get there. Even and a lot of the Twitch streamers, Stu will know, if you're a 200 to 300 viewer Twitch streamer, you're not making bank. You're making an okay amount of money if you've got the subs and stuff, but you're not making bank. And so at some point, you can't do it forever. And I think that's one of the things, unfortunately, with any kind of content creation, you just have to accept. If you want to try and make it as a streamer, you need to be prepared to put in the graft of potentially 2 years of making crap all. And it's just one of those things that content creation for 95% of people is a passion project and should be treated as such. And if they abandon it, it's because they didn't have the time, the effort, or they didn't get the money that they wanted, or couldn't convert it to a place where they felt that they could do it full time. and you know, or they found a game that they thought was going to be more successful more quickly, and they jumped to it. There was an example of a guy who played auto chess called Phone Cats. He did that because he went from Clash Royale because he hated it, but he dropped viewers going to auto chess, and he went back to Clash Royale because he realized he couldn't sustain on auto chess, and that's very fair. It's a perfectly sensible decision to make.
I think I guess it comes back to the thing as well, is like at the end of the day, you know, like you said, you know, most of the time it's a passion project. Sometimes you just get bored of the game. I guess at the end of the day, sometimes you need that change. Sometimes you're like, oh, okay, I'm not enjoying this game anymore. There's a new game that's come out. Let's try that instead, and things like that. Yeah, it's kind of a difficult one in terms of abandoning. I don't know if it's, I mean, I can't talk for other people obviously, but I don't know if it's abandoning in a way because they, you know, because of the devs or because they don't like the game anymore. Obviously everyone has their own opinions about stuff and everything. I mean, I think I can name two people off the top of my head that started doing Wild Rift and abandoned, which is Assassin Dave started to do it, and now I think he's doing Pokemon Unite, and then also Chris as well, which I remember. He used to do Wild Rift, and now he's gone to Pokemon Unite, and I think they're doing, you know, they're both doing. Actually, no, I think Assassin Dave's gone back to
Mobile Legends.
AOV or whatever, Mobile Legends or AOV, whatever he's on. Yeah. So again, you know, it's a situation where, you know, there's multiple genres of the game. There's multiple situations where new games are going to come out. There's always going to be new, you know, probably MOBAs that are going to come out as well. People are going to try that, see how content goes for that and things like that. So I think abandoning is a very, I guess, strong word, but I can understand where he's coming from, because obviously, you know, in a situation you kind of, you know, want content creators to stay, because obviously then, you know, it helps with like people playing and their fans and things like that as well at the same time, I guess you can say.
I've just looked at Dave's channel. I think he has gone back to Mobile Legends, but you know, I mean, I don't even know. I don't know how Pokemon was. I don't know how Pokemon Unite was doing either. But you know, at the end of the day,
I can't remember either.
Big Spin was the same. He did Wild Rift. He went back to Clash Royale. You know, it's fine for content creators to try different things out, because they, like, who wants to play the same game? Like, I can't imagine the pain that Clash Royale content creators are going through after having played that game over and over again and try and take it freaking seriously for like 7 years. Like, I cannot remember. I cannot imagine the pain that they're going through to have to do that. You know, so it's fine for content creators to want to try different things out. It's fine for them to try and find something that makes them happy, because at the end of the day, happiness is what keeps a lot of them going. Assassin Dave was a very special human being, but he was trying to find something that was just a different, a breath of fresh air from Mobile Legends, which I don't blame him for. You know, I think you take those chances. You could say what you like about Dave. He was definitely a divisive character, but he gave it his all. He moved to Korea. He ran huge tournaments. He really put the he really put the graft in to try and make, you know, Wild Rift work for him. It didn't work for him, and that's fair. That's fine. That's absolutely fine that it didn't work for him, because at the end of the day, Hells was, you know, someone who stepped up and took that kind of space in the market, and has done an amazing job. And I think Hells deserves all the success that he's got from his channel. Let's just move on very quickly. Gifting restrictions, they suck. I really hate them. And actually, just go back to the way it was. I understand it's to stop people buying Wild Course for cheap or something and getting them gifted in other things, but just stop it.
One thing I actually want to say about that, actually, I would love a system where they, again, it comes back to the whole like Riot with content creators sort of thing. Give us a sort of way where we can give you our IDs or something, and we're not restricted. We are not the problems. Me, Excoundrel, Hells, Darkbreaker, we are not the problems. We want to do giveaways. We want to do these sort of things where it's just like, oh, you know, new skin lines come out, let's give away some skins. You know, new wild passes come out, let's give away some wild passes. Now it's completely impossible, and you know,
it's made our life significantly harder.
I mean, the only way we can really do giveaways now is through like either PayPal, which some people might not even have, especially because it's a mobile game as well. You know, some people might not have PayPal. I don't even know how else you would do it. Like, I guess credit card, I mean, bank card, like transfers, which obviously no one wants to do. So yeah, I think that's quite a touchy subject with all content creators, to be fair.
Absolutely. I think with DevStream, that was a really great thing that they did. I actually wish they would do more of those. And I think I'm gonna tie this into devs' interaction with content creators. I think Riot have some of the best player-facing and content creating comms of almost any dev team that I know in existence. I think the Riot comms on socials, I think the Riot comms strategy in general is really, really, really good.
Yeah, for sure.
And the devs put themselves out there, and I would hate to be Ben Draggles, like, because because he gets thrown so much shit on social media, and it's not even his job to answer those questions. Like, but he puts himself out there time and time again to interact with the community, and so do a lot of devs on Twitter. And I think Riot has some of the best players. I want to give a special shout out to Rogueful, who I've chatted with on several occasions. He's absolutely beastly on Reddit. He has some great conversations on the Reddit with people. He's very open and honest about the things that he was doing previously when he was on the item side of things. And I think a lot of the devs put more than they even need to into player-facing comms, and we are very, very, very lucky to have the devs that we do in terms of the way they communicate on social channels, because they don't need to. They could say, it's my fucking job, I don't give a shit plus 5 p.m, fuck off. And like, but they don't.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, and they take the crap that people throw them on social media, and they take it in mostly good spirits. And I feel bad for Juno, for instance, who recently posted something on Twitter that, they want to be open, but I just get so much crap that I can't, and I think it's Riot's devs are amazing, and we are very lucky to have them, and you should treat them as if we're lucky to have them. Ask them relevant questions to their role. It doesn't take 2 seconds to look what their role is on Twitter. Ben is the comms lead. Draggles is the comms lead. Do not ask him why someone didn't get buffed or nerfed, because it's not his fucking job. If you want to ask him when is the next dev diary coming out, or Ben, can we expect some more communication around matchmaking or something like that? Yeah, he probably can answer those types of questions, but he's not going to fucking tell you why Jhin hasn't been buffed in 2 patches or something, because it's just not his job. Sorry, but it pisses me off. It does really piss me off. So, I think we just need to be very, appreciative towards the level of comms that we get from our devs.
Yeah, I think I can definitely agree with you in pretty much every single point. I mean, obviously, Endstep was the one that did the dev stream quite recently. He was talking about the recent patch and everything. Unfortunately, I didn't catch it live, but I pretty much watched like most of the VOD and everything. And he goes super in depth. So if you haven't seen that, then make sure you check out Endstep on Twitch and everything as well. But yeah, I mean, sometimes I click on like Draggles' tweet, for example, or anyone, and you scroll through the comments and you just think, really, is there really any necessity like towards any of it? At the end of the day, they've got jobs to do. They've got situations where sometimes these guys have to make difficult decisions. At the end of the day, sometimes people agree with it, people won't agree with it. At the end of the day, I mean, I definitely agree with you with the whole thing. With like the whole devs, I don't think I've seen a lot of devs from a lot of games be as open and as honest as Wild Rift devs. I'll be totally honest. I mean, there's quite a lot of people as well. Dragos, Gino, Endstep. I mean, it's a lot of people. There's a lot of people that take their time out of their day and they're just making it, better and more open for Wild Rift. Yeah, no worries. You can carry. God, you love to see it. Yeah. Oh, we have baby on stream now.
Yeah.
Baby on stream. It's fine. We can cut out everything.
Sorry. Parent things. If he starts screaming, I apologize.
It's fine. Don't worry. It's all good. What was you talking about? Oh, yeah, I mean, the whole dev situation and everything. But yeah, I mean, we kind of spoke about that already. If you want to move on to
let's
the next thing.
We might not be able to cover this all in one episode. I'm not going to
lie. This is I didn't realize we were going on for an hour and a half. We've been talking a lot, but I think we've kind of covered both sides of each story, which I think is a good way to look at things.
I like to be as balanced as possible, and I think that's important when you take these you do these kind of discussions, because there are things that are wrong. There are things that are wrong. But there are things that are wrong with I can name things that are wrong with everything in life, not just games.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think it's always worth to be balanced about when
no one's perfect and nothing's perfect at the end of the day. Exactly. That's the way that you have to look at things.
That's the way the universe works.
Yep.
Balance. I mean, I think that Riot have. I'm going to link this in the description of my comment. Riot have made a blog post about how they look to balance champions. They've been quite open with the framework that they use to balance champions. Right, so I don't need to talk about why champions are buffed enough, because I'll link that in the description. But basically, they have a certain win percentage threshold and loss percentage threshold. You know, like they basically look at the win rates, and they have certain percentages that they think are either too much or too low. And once it crosses those threshold in a certain elo range, they look at whether that champion needs to be buffed or nerfed, right? So they the TLDR is that they buff and nerf champions based on their respective win rates across a range of elos. Which, you know, buffing off win rates and alone is something that could be form a whole different podcast in its own right. But that is the way that they do it, and they've been quite open about it. I think the discussion point on this that I do want to touch on is that, do you think the game should be buffed around high elo / competitive? That should be the opening question, you know, that you could sort of have to take a stab at.
Yeah, I think balancing is quite a difficult subject to talk about. I think in a situation where, like, there's loads of situations where people feel like this champion should be buffed, this champion should be nerfed, this champion should be, but you know, it goes on and on and on. I think, I mean, if you talk about the current state of the game, I feel like there are like maybe a few champions. I mean, the only problem is we only see it as one side, I guess, of the perspective where it's from a high elo. Obviously, both of us are, I think you're Master, Grandmaster, I'm Master, Grandmaster at the same time as well. We kind of only see things from that side of, I guess, the game. We don't actually know what the situation's like in lower elos, for example, in terms of like champion win rate, how many, what champions are being played and things like that as well. And obviously Riot knows all of that information in terms of low elo and high elo at the same time. And at the end of the day, they want to make it balanced for everyone. At the end of the day, you know, there's not everyone is playing in Grandmaster, Challenger, Master. At the end of the day, you know, there are some people that are just, you know, sometimes just not as good, or they're new to the game, for example, and they're only like silver, emerald, whatever, and things like that as well. And I think you have to kind of have that balance where it's like you have to try and, you know, help the high elo people, but you also have to help the low elo people at the same time, which I think it's difficult. I mean, I would hate to be on the balance team. I mean, obviously, you know, and Step again, I'm going to bring him up again, obviously, with the balance team. And he did, like I said, the stream about it and everything like that, which is really went in depth into, you know, why champions like Jason are not being nerfed and why champions like Jin and that are not being buffed. And it's so hard being a balanced dev. Imagine trying to balance. I mean, you take PC League of Legends, for example. How many champions they have? 160 now, whatever it is. I don't even know the number. It's whatever it is. Even Wild Rift, for example. There are so many champions they have to look at every single patch. There's so many things they have to take into consideration every single patch. And they don't want to make like a slight over buff or a slight over nerf and whatever, and then the champion becomes completely useless. You know, I would hate to be a balance, and I respect all the balance devs and everything like that, because that is probably, I would say, one of the hardest jobs to try and balance champions and things like that. I don't know if you agree with that and everything as well, what I just said.
I do, because I think what we have to take into account is that you've I'm not going to touch on the low elo high elo thing again, because I think you really nicely summed that up. But what I would say is that each champion has a unique interaction with every other champion in the game, the way that they play out in matchups, the way that they're influenced in team comps. So it's like the butterfly effect. You make one change to a champion, that affects its interaction with every other champion in the game in some way, shape, or form, either be it minor or major, right? So it's important to know that when you are making these balance adjustments, you are actually adjusting things more than just like their relative power level. You're adjusting their interactions with every other champion, both on your team and on the enemy team, and the way they interact across the board. It is a very delicate process to balance champions in a way that is good. I would say the patch 2.6a was some of the best balance I think we've ever had in this game, except for maybe Jace being a little bit too strong. And, you know, I think Lee Sin is the prime example of a champion that you'll see a lot of people, including myself, cry out for nerfs with. You'll see a lot of people say this champion is busted. You know, this champion is too good. Like in high elo, he's just like a pick or ban. Like a lot of the time, like Lee Sin is one of those champions that you'll see a huge amount of uproar from the high elo players. But you give a Lee Sin to a silver player, he's going to be absolutely giga garbage, because like to really take advantage of Lee Sin, you need to be good at the game. You need to understand how Lee Sin is supposed to play. Lee Sin is an aggressive jungler. Lee Sin is high mobility. He's high gank pressure. He needs to have good map awareness. You know, to make his kick work in late game, you need to be mechanically skilled enough to make it, you know, to function. You know, so Lee Sin is a champion that is clearly going to probably be below 50% win rate in low elo, but above 50% win rate in high elo. So therefore, it's really you'll never balance that champion because his kit is not designed to be unanimously played across the board. Master Yi is the opposite. Master Yi is one of the lowest mechanical steel champions in the game, apart from maybe timing your Alpha Strike, and maybe timing your meditate. But those are like two in terms, or maybe Tryndamere is another example. Tryndamere is one of the lowest skilled champions in the game, right? His kit revolves around basic attacking people and then just pressing your ultimate before you're going to die. Everything else that Tryndamere requires you to do is surplus to requirements. That champion is purely a stat check champion. You get a certain amount of items, you're going to basic attack them hard enough that you kill them quickly. This is why Tryndamere is very good in jungle in low elo, because he doesn't require any skill to play, realistically. However, that's probably why his win rate is high at lower levels. However, he's very easily exploitable in high elo. People know his weaknesses. They know where to put pressure on him. They know how to kite him effectively. They pick comps that are designed to try and slow or shut down Tryndamere. And so therefore Tryndamere in high elo is not as overwhelming and not as powerful because people have more idea about how to deal with him. So you can see that a champion interacts differently depending on the level or the relative level of skill that the player is playing with, and so it's a very difficult thing to get right. And so I am one of those people that on patch notes I complain about buffs and nerfs because, again, as you said, I see it from the perspective of my games and what I play on a regular basis, as does everyone else. But that's the problem when you're the Riot dev team. You have bronze, silver, gold, platinum, all of them with different voices, all of them with different experiences of different champions, all of them, and I do a tier list and I get people like, why is like Master Yi in C tier jungle? Like, he stomps all my games. And I'm like that is the thing, that everyone has a different experience of champions at different levels, and that is what makes balancing hard. But sometimes there are just obnoxious examples like release Kennen or release Lulu. Like there, there are examples where they need hot fixing or sorting out, but for the most part, it's a delicate process balancing champions.
Yeah, it's a lot. I think we've definitely touched on that quite a lot. I mean, it's definitely a difficult one. And I guess the balance changes come into the situation of like patch 3.0, which I guess could be like our last like overall topic, and then the other ones we can talk about hopefully another time and things like that. The thing about patch 3.0 is that, I mean, we've mentioned it a lot, and I think a lot of people have mentioned it a lot. The reason why patch 3.0 is patch 3.0 is because it's a new year. I mean, some of people have probably heard us say this many, many times, but people are saying, why is it patch 3.0? Why is it this? Why is it that? Etc. Etc. And the reason why it's patch 3.0 is because it's a new year. Most of the time in a new year, Riot does either, patch 12 or 13 or whatever it is now in PC League. And now that's why, it's patch 3.0 for Wild Rift and everything as well.
And it's associated with a new season a lot of the time in League of Legends. And often new seasons are where big sweeping changes come in, gameplay changes come in. And so the classic hierarchy or the classic denomination that Riot gives its patches is based on a yearly cycle, and their seasons operate on a yearly cycle. Wild Rift is different. Our seasons are much shorter, and patch 3.0 purely denominates a new year, I think, in terms of the cycle of patches, which sucks because 3.0 is a grand number, and it's, moving from 2 to 3 makes you feel like there should be again, it's perception of that number makes you feel like it's going to be big and should be a bigger impact. But unfortunately, that's all on us. That's just perception. Riot did not need to bring anything big to 3.0. Maybe you could argue that maybe they should have felt that the perception of 3.0 was going to be big, and so could have planned for that accordingly in advance. But realistically, when you look at the granular truth of what 3.0 is, it's simply the first patch of the new year.
Yeah. I think I think like you said, it's all about, I guess, kind of our experiences as well. Again, from like us playing PC League for so long, we're kind of used to the whole, okay, it's a new year, there's going to be a new season, there's going to be a bunch of changes, like they added like a bunch of Drakes and a bunch of changes to this season and everything. But obviously Wild Rift is just a different game overall. I think we've seen that with like the way champions work, the way the map works, everything in general is just completely different to Wild Rift, which kind of gets me into my my next topic, which actually is completely like blown over my head. I was actually going to mention something. Oh, okay. So I think the thing about 3.0 is as well, I think it's definitely come at a difficult time as well, because we actually only have, at the time of recording this, I think both of us are going to upload this tomorrow on the 27th, it's currently 26th, we only have a week and a bit until Europe's main competitive season starts. Now, what normally happens with PC League of Legends, and Excoundrel will know this as well, but some people might not know this, is at first they do a preseason. They do a preseason for, I can't remember for exactly how long it is. They do a preseason, they test out everything. They're like, okay, we're going to do all these changes, we're going to test out everything, and then they're going to see how things work. And then they make little changes, and then they go into the actual season, which is when the competitive season starts and where it's actually balanced. The problem with the time of 3.0 is that it's so close to the I think even some regions have even started competitive. I think China started already. I could be mistaken, but I think Korea has started already as well. So imagine if you're a competitive player or a competitive team or anything like that, and you get patch 3.0 a week before a competitive season is supposed to start, and they add all of these changes, they add all of these items and things like that. I think it's kind of difficult because we don't really know when a pre-season starts for Wild Rift yet, or when the actual competitive season starts, because the game is still technically brand new. This is only, the first year of Wild Rift esports, so I think that's a bit difficult. I don't know if you have anything to say about that, but I think that's kind of like, I mean, I could be wrong, but that could be one of the main reasonings behind, the whole patch 3.0 is small sort of subject, I guess you can say.
And I think you actually hit the nail on the head there. And I think there's a couple of things to talk about in that particular point. We don't have a tournament realm. So in League of Legends PC has PBE, which is the public beta environment. It has your main live server, and then it has something called the tournament realm, which is a very special version of the servers that is given out to tournament organizers to organize tournaments on. That server operates on a different patch timeline to your live server. So usually what happens is that the main competitive season will be played on 1 or 2 patches maximum throughout the entire season for the most part, because they introduce those changes slowly, and they want competitive parity on the same patch for the most part. Wild Rift does not have a PBE, which is separate. Not going to get on it too much. I'd love for Wild Rift to have a PBE. That would be amazing. But to make it work on a phone is quite difficult. You'd need
I was going to say it's quite hard. You
need different apps. Like Vainglory had a PBE. You needed a separate app entirely to get onto the PBE,
Crazy.
Which was quite difficult to do. PBE on phone would be difficult just because of, I think, app size and in general a bit annoying. They might have an internal PBE. I'm assuming they do for testing, but they don't have a public beta environment. And we don't have a tournament realm. So all tournaments are played on live patches on Wild Rift, which I think, because Wild Rift esports is such a core part of their game philosophy, they want this game to be seen as one of the top tier mobile esports, which frankly, I think based on game quality alone, it is. I think they want this to be seen as one of the top tier esports in the mobile scene. They cannot be wildly changing the game 2 weeks before these guys' seasons kicks off, and I fully understand that. And they are trying their best, I think, to time patch releases in a way that doesn't massively impact the regular season of your competitive sort of worldwide competitive teams. If we had a tournament realm, and if we had a different server to be playing Wild Rift on, this might be a different story. But for the most part, right now we're looking at just the fact that we have to share a live server with competitive environments across the world, which means that it's very likely that big changes are being delayed until a break in between the competitive seasons, and that's maybe when we'll see some big changes. So I would expect, given what I know of the timelines, like May or June, you might expect to see some bigger changes coming through, because that's when I think most areas will end up wrapping up their first splits. Baby rage.
Baby rage over Wild Rift. Yeah, we're talking about Wild Rift. A lot of baby rage. I think you pretty much summed up everything there. I think You know, in the whole situation, like you said, of PBE and tournament realm, it's going to be so hard for them to do it on mobile, and maybe they are thinking about it, and I think that's definitely something that they should look into, because there is then you can get into a situation where patch 3.0 can be big, there can be a lot of changes, but then when you're playing on you know, the tournament realm, they can bring it back a patch or two. You know, they can just play on the same patch throughout the you know, the whole tournament, and then that doesn't get into a situation where, you know, 1 week before the tournament there's all these changes, or sometimes even I think there's even a situation where a couple of days before the tournament there were all of these changes and everything as well, which again it's, you know, both sides of this, you know, the story as well. You know, it's obviously it's hard for competitive players, but it's also hard for like Wild Rift devs and everything in general as well.
Baby Rage, 1 second, let me just mute. I'm gonna mute Baby Rage.
You're gonna mute Baby Rage. I think that's, I'm not really too sure if there's like anything else that we've completely forgot to mention. There is one thing actually, which funny enough is one of the things that someone actually asked as well in Twitter as well, is the whole situations probably be the last topic we talk about, the whole situations on new runes and items. Now there was an interesting thing that Nstep said in his stream. I can't remember I'm not going to quote this completely because I can't remember 100% what he said, but I remember him mentioning something, saying like there actually isn't enough space at the moment for them to actually add more runes. Now that might sound really strange and everything. Again, I'm not 100% too sure. But again, you have to probably go back and watch his stream and everything, his VOD. Hopefully his VOD is still there, because I remember watching it. There's a situation where apparently they don't have like enough room and everything, and they basically have to do a full overhaul of the whole rune system and everything if they were to add more runes and everything, which kind of gets me to the point of everyone wants new runes, everyone wants new items, everyone wants new stuff, everyone wants new champions, and new champions the whole thing as well, because they're delaying champion releases, which I think me and Excoundrel think quite deeply about that and everything, which again is a whole nother subject. But the whole situation around new items, new runes and things like that is that yes, everyone wants new runes and everything, but again it's a situation of how much becomes too much, I guess, at the same time as well. I think I want to like say as well at the same time, it's like, do we want more runes? Do we not want more runes? Is it going to affect the way things work and everything like that? I don't know if you can unmute Excoundrel, maybe have your words on runes and everything. No, it's all good.
I've got him to slightly chill out.
Oh, you got him. But yeah, runes is a bit of a touchy subject with some people.
So like, firstly, champions, I am slightly miffed that champion release timings is going down, but also I want to, again, I'm going to empathize here. Empathy is a very important skill to learn in life, guys. It's probably quite strenuous for devs, especially given that I think the Wild Rift team reduced in size post-launch, because that's natural for any game, by the way. Once a game is launched in every region, you generally tend to have people who worked on the game up until that point and then move on to other projects. I think that's a very normal part of game development. One of the things that, you know, I would say is that they probably just don't want to overwork the dev team. Like, at the end of the day, you don't want crunch culture being there all the time for new runes. And Riot does generally tend to look after its employees really well. So I think, you know, in general, we'd probably just at the point where all the champions that were probably developed before the game released. It's okay, baby. All the were probably developed before the game's release have now been cycled out, and now we're just getting it so that we don't end up running out of champions to release, because there are still ones being made for the future. So, you know, that is my personal opinion on champions. I was miffed about it, though. Don't get me wrong. I was miffed about it, and I was upset about it.
Yeah, I think most of the people are upset about it, to be fair, because to be fair, like the amount of champions that are in PC League, I think we spoke about this briefly before, like off this podcast, but if they were to still carry on releasing 2 champions every single month, I can't remember how long. I think we were mentioning it before, but I can't remember how long it was.
Like 5 years, still, basically, you know.
Yeah, exactly. There's still a long amount of time before every single champion gets released, which is kind of but obviously they probably have their reasoning behind it, whether it's a situation like you said where they could be having struggles with maybe some champions that they want to release, but they can't find a way to try and make it work on mobile, which again is a situation that they have mentioned before. They're trying to make every single champion not really unique, but kind of work on mobile, because some champions are going to be quite difficult to work on mobile. I hate to bring out these names,
right? Like people talk about
yeah,
Aphelios, right?
Aphelios, Viego, Kiana.
I mean, Viego's never happening. I'm sure Viego's never happening. Like
that's just a few champions. I mean, I'm sure there's loads more as well that Riot have probably thought about. And again, they're trying to make it in a situation where they're trying to theme champion releases to kind of get into like other situations. Obviously, we had like the Caitlyn Jace launch, which was related to Arcane. We've got Shen and Karma releasing in patch 3.1, which is kind of related into Guild versus Guild season 2. So
Shen,
it's kind of like, yeah, Shen's going to be a quite fun one. Support Shen. Or maybe APC Karma as well, anyway.
Baron lane Shen every game.
Yeah. But yeah, it obviously it's kind of upsetting because obviously, you know, there's only going to be like, it looks like there's only going to be one champion every month now, which obviously is quite a unfortunate thing. But I think, I guess, on the other flip side of that as well is like sometimes I actually enjoy that there's not as many champions as what there are on PC League, because, you know, I think I mean, I talk for myself, I don't know if you feel the same, but when I first started playing Wild Rift, I just had so much nostalgia from like when League first came out. I had this situation where it was like there's not a lot of champions, it feels like I'm playing a fresh game even though I know these sort of champions. You know, all the old items are in the game as well, which obviously some of them unfortunately being removed, you know, RIP Frozen Mullet, please bring it back. You know, there is that situation where it's just like, even though everyone does want all these cool champions and everything like that, we do have that nostalgia in a way as well, which I guess some of us can enjoy at the same time. But yeah, it's a bit unfortunate with that. Obviously, I don't know what you feel about the whole like rune system and item system and everything like that as well.
I'll make this our last, because I think we have covered a lot of the comments that we've seen on Twitter and on Discord as well already in the podcast. I'll make this the last thing that we talk about.
Yeah.
Runes and items. Items, I think, are in an okay place. I think we've got some cool items. I did like the innovation that we saw with Ixtali's Seed Jar and Hextech Mega Drive. I think Seed Jar's too much of a meme item for me, but I do really like Mega Drive, and I think Mega Drive is an item that could work with some stat adjustments to it. But yeah, I think Seed Jar's a bit of a meme item, just because the actual power level of plants in the game are not that high. You know, like that's the problem with Seed Jar, is that getting your team in, the best one you'll get, in my opinion, is Blast Cone, right? The best one that you can get is Blast Cone. So getting your team to coordinate around a Blast Cone placement for some sort of wild engage, I think is too difficult to make work. In competitive, maybe there's a place for it, but again, I would think the item stats would need to be too good. Like, you would need to overbuff the item stats to forgo what is really kind of a very niche effect. But for like Mega Drive, I think with some good stat adjustments, you could see a really, really cool item there, and I think that's definitely a cool item. I remember saying that in my patch notes video that the power fantasy of that item is to be able to cycle your active twice in one fight. So you start off the fight, and you can cycle it and get it off again in one fight. That would be the point of that item, in my opinion. You know, like the power fantasy of it. In terms of runes, I don't know whether it was space in terms of UI space or space in terms of like memory space and what was assigned to runes.
I think it's actually UI space. If I remember correctly, again, don't quote me, but I'm pretty sure he said there's actually not enough UI space for them to actually add.
I mean, they would need to rework. They would need to rework the way that the UI is the UI looks at rune selection, right, to be able to add more runes. But I think the problem is they either need to rethink the selection of runes that they're offering, or they need to add more runes, because right now Conqueror is probably used in 70% of all players. You know, I think Font of Life is nice, but it's a Braum rune. Like that's the problem. You don't want you don't want a rune that is only for one champion, right? Guardian would be much more used, I think, by a significant number of tank supports rather than Font of Life, right? And Braum would use Guardian more than not. Font of Life could maybe even be added as a secondary rune somewhere down the line. The problem is also there's a lack of runes for AD carries, like press the attack and lethal tempo. And the problem is that you've got a very stagnant rune meta where Conqueror is basically the best choice for every rune. And I don't think you solve this by nerfing Conqueror. I think you solve it by offering genuine alternatives that work. I think Summon Airy is obviously needed for Enchanter supports, but you'd really love to have Comet, you know, for actual AP poke supports. You know, I think Electrocute does make sense for assassins, but it's also outshined by Conqueror. You'd need to probably buff Electrocute to make it really valuable. So yeah, I just think the problem is that the runes are constricting kind of like what I feel is important additions to make certain champions really viable and open up in the meta. But of course, as we mentioned with balance, you add a new rune in that would a new keystone especially in, you suddenly open up a playing field of a whole balance mismatch everywhere. And you know, that would be very risky to do that given the game has been balanced around these keystones for the longest time. So whilst I'd love to see it, I do understand the reasoning behind not wanting to introduce runes sooner rather than later. However, there is this argument that goes around of like, it's a mobile game, it's simple. I think that is the most bullshit argument I've ever heard in my life. Wild Rift as a game is difficult. Wild Rift as a game as a concept, MOBAs as a concept are complex and require investment to truly enjoy. The additions of extra runes is a minimal complexity compared to the game itself. And so I think like that excuse should not be used for not runes. There is, you know, if you say we literally can't fit them in, or it would require a whole UI rebalance, or it would mess up our balancing so much that we might completely destabilize the game. Those are all very valid criticisms of why runes should not be added to the game. But complexity is definitely not one of the valid criticisms that I think that should be used when it comes to runes and but like I said, items I actually think are in a nice place. I actually think we're in a pretty good place with items overall. I would say maybe some, I don't know. I do think runes and maybe support itemization could do with a little bit of further expanding. I know that's what Hextech Mega Drive and Xtali CGR was supposed to do, but they're just not being used enough right now. But in general, I think that itemization in Wild Rift is actually in a quite nice spot. I think Edge of Night was a great addition. I think Edge of Night is really, it's a bit OP, but it has really, it's really brought more build. Like Pantheon has suddenly become extremely meta because of Edge of Night. You know, like Pantheon was fringe meta before, but Edge of Night has made him a strong pick in a lot of situations, I think. But
I think that's kind of the worry as well. I mean, quickly, like if you add a new rune, if you add a new item, again, it goes into a situation what we talked about before with balance changes. It suddenly makes a champion stronger. It suddenly makes a champion, you know, weaker because then that champion's stronger, and it just ties up and up. I mean, I'll take an example, Rageblade, for example. If they add Rageblade, even though Varus is really strong, you know, Varus could be stronger, Kayle could be stronger. You add like Pressy Attack, Lucian could be stronger. You add lethal tempo, you add so many different things, and you add so many different items, you know, Rageblade with Vayne as well and everything. And it gets into this whole situation of like, you know, they have to balance a lot of champions as well. But I think we talked for a lot. I think this has been like an hour and a lot longer than I thought.
Let's close it down here. That was really fun though, Stu. And
yes,
I think we can maybe expand to include people like Snitch, and I know another caster called Stress would love to be involved with the conversation, so we could probably expand this out if people like it. Let us know in the comments what you think. This is not a direct reply to Hells, but it's more of like a sort of like I told Hells I'd be doing this, by the way, so you know he's very aware that we're making this. But it's more of like a different perspective on some of the issues, especially from people that have been involved with Riot for longer than just Wild Rift, which is, you know, me and Stu have been involved with Riot titles from TFT to PC to Legends of Runeterra to an extent as well. So we kind of have more of an understanding of the operation that goes into Riot games. But
hopefully we'll do more of this as well and everything.
I really enjoyed it. I think it was a really good discussion, and I think we didn't cover everything that we wanted to because we talk a long time. But hopefully you get more balanced insight into the way certain things work in the game. And the one takeaway from me, guys, is treat the Riot dev team with respect and give them some love, because you don't know how lucky you are to have devs that put themselves out like that there on socials, and we are extremely lucky to have devs that are willing to transcend work thresholds to talk to players in a manner that they don't need to do so. And I think, you know, we should just treat them with a bit of respect. Also read their fucking job titles. But that's it. And all the timestamps will be in the description on my end. I'm sure they will be on Stu's as well. You can catch this. We'll probably try to do it. I don't know if weekly is viable, but maybe every 2 weeks or something like that.
I mean, hopefully it keeps. It just depends on both of our work and everything and stuff like
My,
that.
my wife did come down and complain that I'd left her alone with a screaming baby for an hour and a bit, which is very fair. So yeah,
we'll get some time again.
Let's see how we do. But yeah, I've really enjoyed this, Stu. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much as well. We will end it here and hopefully have all have a good rest of the day, evening, or whatever you are in the world.